Okay, thanks everyone for coming to today's seminar, which is the last seminar and also a research proposal seminar by Emanuel Gomez. He's going to be talking about traceability of sustainability credentials in the Australian grain industry. As a research seminar, he's also looking for good feedback from people. So hopefully you will have comments and questions for him at the end. So it's all yours. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending the seminar. Today I will be presenting my research proposal. I'm working on the supervision of Michael Barton, Ross Kingwell, and Emil Muguera in this project. So the main purpose of my PhD is to investigate and evaluate by combining quantitative methodologies and case study approach, whether supply chain investments in traceability that deliver on Western Australia cropping systems sustainability credentials could become a source of value creation for Australian grain industry in the international market. Additionally, we intend to address which are the attitudes and how ready farmers are for adoption of traceability technologies. Giving a little bit of background in the concept of traceability, we take this definition as traceability being an information tool which is able to trace and track moving trajectories of footprints or an information record history of various food, raw materials, and ingredients across the entire supply chain stages. Those systems could become a source of reliable information that could be shared across supply chain participants and could be used to monitor, to achieve quality assurance, and other objectives that I will explain. So basically, applications of traceability in the agricultural supply chain, well known is the use it had for biosecurity purposes in the late 90s with many food outbreaks as the mad cow disease or food contamination in the poultry industry, and several cases of Escherichia coli contaminations in vegetable supply chains have increased the popularity of the concept of traceability because it became a way of efficiently detect where the food contaminated was standing in the supply chain and improve the efficiency of the recall processes. But later on, it began to have applications from in the management discipline, and traceability has also been useful as a way of increasing transactional efficiencies by integrating information of the different activities happening within the company environment, and also as a quality management tool for increasing or upgrading, for example, in the grain industry. But in this research, I'm pretty much interested in the use of traceability as a source of product differentiation and how traceability could meet that purpose. Well, consumers' information needs about the history of a food product could be attended by offering traceability systems that deliver information that they will be interested in knowing. So to give a little bit of background about the global drivers of why traceability could generate value, consumers are increasingly showing preferences for having more transparency in the supply chain, and also they are interested in knowing more about the sustainability attributes involved with their purchasing decisions. But it's not just about consumers, it's also about government regulations and international legislations that are reflected in increasing non-tariff measures. This example, for example, we see in the grain industry, there are more than 90 grain industry issues affecting more than 17 markets with impact for the Australian exports, and that affects around 15 grain products. This is a study that was done last year for Grain Australia. And another important driver is there is an increasing supply chain information need for ESG reporting metrics that traceability are well suited for delivering and satisfying partners in the supply chain request for this valuable information about sustainability metrics that they are interested in showing to their customers how well they are doing in terms of their behavior towards the environment and sustainability goals. This is just to show an example of a new legislation that came into place 3 days ago. It was in the news. The European Union is requesting to prove that the grains, beef, as we see there, the food products that are entering the European community needs to prove that they don't come from areas which has been deforested. So to prove that, I see big potential in having traceability systems. From an Australian context, we see that the federal government is heavily investing in developing national frameworks. They are putting around $70 million of investment in having these projects going. We also identified that there is a big potential for the Australian farming sector to incorporate digital technologies that could boost the agricultural output at around $20 million, but that could be synergized with downstream benefits associated of this technology generating benefit across the different stages downstream in the supply chain. Another important thing that I have commented about the global context, and Australia is no exception, is that the Australian grain industry have identified signals from downstream food manufacturers and retailers about consumer sustainability purchasing criteria that I will explain later, but there is a growing demand from trader counterparts to have more information on the sustainability credentials. And this has been detected as the most factors of concern: chemical residues, food safety, and environmental provenance seems to be 3 important metrics that consumers are really willing to have more information. So against this backdrop, we have identified that there are no previous studies analyzing the economics of traceability, investment, and adoption to track grain sustainability credentials in the Australian grain supply chain. And in order to contribute to filling that gap, these research questions have been proposed in this study, which has to do with how can investments in tracking technologies that help to verify these credentials of the WA grain production become a source of value creation in the international market. And a complementary question is what factors will influence WA farmers' intention to adopt this kind of technologies, which has implications of information sharing about environmental information with supply chain participants. So in order to address both questions, I am proposing to use this conceptual framework which depicts the underlying structure of the analysis. And basically it's a supply and demand conceptual framework which encompass aspects coming from the demand side that have been commenting, which has to do with how consumer preferences combined with domestic and international legislation generates a requirement for information, and how that information is identified as market premium or market entry barriers in the market. So that information need from a supply side is reflected in participants in the supply chain at the primary level and downstream stages, trying to identify solutions for traceability investment that could attend these needs of information assurance requirement. But when deciding on what traceability system could be suitable for defining, for meeting that purpose, a decision has to be made about this system depth, breadth, and precision. These 3 concepts are very important in the traceability literature, as depth defines the distance at which the information can be tracked in both directions, The breadth is a concept that refers to the amount of data that could be obtained from the system, and the precision, which is the smallest unit of identified product. So based on those concepts, a traceability system model is defined, which then we see that there is a big influence on the technology offer or supply in order to have these systems working. So the technology will be an important factor defining the cost of such a system. And as we have seen probably in traceability applications, blockchain is becoming a very powerful tool that it's really contributing to decrease this investment cost. But we are not just assuming that because investment is profitable, it will be immediately adopted. We incorporate in the analysis factors that will influence adoption that for sure has to do with supply chain characteristics. It will be also underpinned by population factors, attributes of the technology itself, and a big issue there is information safety. If the actors are about to share information on sustainability, it's very important to include how information safety will play a role in the adoption process. So the first study of this project will involve exploring factors affecting in the demand side, as we have presented in the conceptual framework, and it will be basically focused in understanding how sustainability claims are operating in the Asian market of grain-based food, in the Asian market. To do this, I will propose to work with a global new product database from Mintel. This is a database containing information on food products labels, which pretty much covers all the grain food products. There are more than 120,000 products that have been launched since 2010, and it has more than 5 million records overall, the products contained in the database. So that database will be subject to trend analysis and hedonic pricing models in order to understand how the claims have been trending in the last years and how those claims are related to any information that we can implicitly conclude from the price analysis. So the outcome from this study will be to identify differences across the markets that we will explore, identify if detectable the implicit prices for those claims, and ultimately we aim to identify how those claims could be supported by traceability solutions, or how traceability could be valued by consumers if those claims were supported by a system informing on the record of that claim. So this is an example of the Mintel, one data from the Mintel. So we have information on the labels containing the country of origin, the market, if the product was imported or not, and where it was obtained. We have information on the date it was published, and also there is information on the claims contained on those labels. The kind of labels contained in the Mintel dataset relates to different categories. We are planning to regroup them in terms of their association to sustainability aspects, and from there we will select specific claims to run our models. But this is just an example of some of the sustainability claims that have been identified when exploring the data. We can see that products indicate if they contain GMO or not, if they are carbon neutral, or the packaging is environmental friendly. Well, there are many aspects that we intend to analyze if they have some effect on prices. For the trend analysis, we will use linear regression analysis, trying to understand how the proportion of products including sustainability claims, have been compared to the overall launch of products, and we will then compare across countries using a location quotient that compares the total, the ratio for the total observations compared to the specific location ratio. So we plan to compare across countries and see if there are differences in those respective across those markets. The hedonic model, but we are recognizing that these product claims as a source of product differentiation are related to the Lancastrian consumer behavior approach. We see that consumers will find in those claims a way of differentiate those products. And by applying Rosen's model that incorporates this approach, we intend to develop this model that will determine how the price of this differentiated good varies with respect to the different set of attributes it possesses. So we'll do the first stage estimation, trying to identify the hedonic price function to reveal these implicit prices, if existing, of the claims attached to the grain-based product base that we will explore. So we assume a model of these characteristics using the same price of the product. We know the price is per 100 grams, and then we will try to incorporate a vector including product characteristics and another vector of claim characteristics and a vector of the location represented by the country.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if you're doing a hedonic study of, land-related issues, each observation is a house sale. What is the observations here? What is the actual individual data items consist of?
We will use a type of product of, for example, oats kind of product that we can group as if it was a house. So we'll try to get a grouping strategy for comparing across those products as if it were the same unit of analysis.
I think in the Mintel data, it's already.
Sorry?
In the Mintel data, it is already grouped by product category.
Yes, there are different categories that we can then open in brands and we can aggregate more. But the idea is to find a level base where we can compare across product once we are able to control for product-specific characteristics.
So each observation is a product with multiple sales? Or?
No, this information is not about sales. It's about the launch prices. So it's not actual purchase. It's the information that on the price when it was launched at that market.
Okay.
All right. So the next study involves partnering with CBH, trying to perform a case study in which we aim to develop this traceability system and build the cost structure of the investment to assess how different fit-for-purpose traceability system for grains that could suit different end market or end user markets, which cost will investment have. We plan to use a benefit cost model developed in Microsoft Excel, getting the information from CBH. So that information doesn't already exist, so we plan to develop the model and try to get that information. So the expected outcome from this study is to understand which is the right system in terms of the depth, breadth, and precision that a system meeting a certain purpose will have from a CBH perspective in relationship with their customers, sorry. So this will include also a cost appraisal of the technologies that will be able to deliver this goal. So we plan to engage, once we have the blueprint, we plan to engage with technology suppliers to understand which are the different alternatives. So to give a little bit of context on CBH operation, CBH is Western Australia most relevant actor in terms of the grain supply chain, handling at around 14 million tons last year and representing Australia, a quarter of Australia exports of grains in the international market. CBH is a cooperative fund integrated by grain growers and is one of the most relevant actors. So we find it very interesting to work closely with them in terms of understanding how a system of the characteristics that I'm proposing could work and operate in an actual case study. Importantly, and touching again on the sustainability credentials, there is a growing volume being exported of certified grain from the ISCC certification, which is the International Sustainability Carbon Certification. And in Australia, it's pretty much known the case of canola. The canola market into Europe represented almost $500 million over the last 12 years. It's interesting to see that it's replicating in the wheat and barley supply chain with a growing volume each year, especially for Australia, which is entering into new markets in Latin America. And this request, as I have been told by CBH and by different traders, is becoming to gain more and more, become more and more frequent. So CBH conducted a survey last year. They wanted to understand what their customers were valuing more in terms of sustainability issues. And surprisingly, traceability was ranked as the most important in terms of what they consider extremely important. Chemical residues were probably the most important, but in terms of what they consider extremely important, traceability ranked very high. So there is already demand for traceability, but it's still not clear how this will be profitable in meeting what customers are requesting. So this represents the system we are trying to develop, in which we will have information coming from the farm, and that information will be flowing downstream in the value chain by trying to identify specific traceability units that could be traced throughout down to a vessel. So our scope will be covering information ranging from the farm down to a vessel hold. And that could be valuable in terms of customers incorporating that later on in their own systems. So this is a general perspective on the idea, but we show, for example, what's already happening. Farmers are already using specific applications in which they have to inform the paddock from where the grain that they are delivering is coming from. And that information is getting into CBH system, but then that information has that level of one-step traceability. We want to understand if having that information getting farther downstream could have some value. So the third study, comprised by this research, will look into the adoption of traceability technologies by farmers in Western Australia. So the idea is to conduct a survey in which we are able to collect this information, not just on how farmers are willing to accept this information sharing technology, but also with our aspects that are worth understanding in advance, in case this could help accelerate any post-adoption strategy or any policy or any market opportunity for the growers to engage in these systems, as they are already doing with the ISCC. So we will apply the survey, and with that information, we are planning to source all the inputs that are required to answer the ADOPT questions. We plan to use the ADOPT tool by Kina to estimate which may be the time that it will take to the Western Australia grain industry to adopt technologies, to adopt traceability technologies, and which may be the level of peak adoption. So the steps of this study will involve having a first first step, we will meet with the technology providers, consultants. We'll try to get the questionnaire, trying to cover the specificities of the technology. And we plan to also gain better knowledge on which are issues in terms of data safety that are worth including in the questionnaire. We plan to retest that with interviewees, probably having participating at different industry events. Third step is circulating the survey, trying also to resort to industry events, sending them by email, participating with GRDC technical updates, and probably, but this is not confirmed, we can use CBH network to get to grain growers. Fourth step would be to analyze that data, run the log model, and use also a regression analysis approach to understand which are the main drivers affecting the intention of farmers to adopt. To give a bit of insight on why they adopt conceptual framework, I found it suitable because it combines aspects not just of the technology, but also of the environment of the population that will have effect on the learning process of the technology. So these 4 quadrants present how adopt is governed by 2 main overarching factors, which is the learning and the relative advantage of the technology, and variables underpinning those factors, which are in the population and in the innovation itself. So these 4 quadrants that combine those interactions will help us to cover important aspects associated to the traceability adoption. And I have selected example questions of the adopt tool that I find very suitable to grasp aspects that are linked to the digital technology adoption. It's very important to understand where farmers are standing in terms of the relevant skills, existing skills and knowledge they already have. The environmental orientation is something that's also very important, because this could be all about money or having extra profits, but I see that there could be also intentions of farmers to show that they are doing things well. The practice complexity, which is represented by the learnability characteristics of the innovation. We understand that the complexity will be an important aspect influencing the adoption, so it will be very interesting to understand how that plays in the level of adoption. And lastly, the time for profit benefit to be realized, which is quite difficult question to answer. It will be interesting to see how different horizons for releasing that benefit will play in the process of adoption. Last slide. So this project is about working in 2 many collaborations with industry partners. IGIC will be an important partner for running the demand analysis. I'll be working with them for conducting the Mintel analysis. They are providing the information. With CBH, we are planning to work in the case study. We have progressed in working a research sponsorship. The Grower Group Alliance is also very interested in helping to conduct and circulate the survey. Well, the GRDC and CSIRO are also partners that probably will be contributing. And the WA Agricultural Research Collaboration has also shown their interest to support this project. So this is the last slide. I'm happy to take any questions and feedback. Thanks.
Emanuel, questions, comments? Right.
Yeah, could you go back to slide 17 and that'll remind me. Yeah. You talk about fit for purpose traceability systems. Do those already exist? And what would you do if they don't?
The fit for purpose? No, the system doesn't exist already. So there are similar systems, but in different supply chain structure. For example, in the containerized industry, there exists, but not in a bulk grain industry. So that's the plan, to identify which would be a reasonable system in terms of not affecting the operation itself, and trying to identify which would be the way of implementing that. But it doesn't exist.
So it's a cost analysis for a hypothetical fit for purpose system.
Yes.
Yes. Raise the question, what happens if actually, is it a problem if actually analysis comes up and says there is no fit for purpose system that CBH can?
Yeah, that could be one answer, and the other answer could be so costly that it's not worth investing. But that would be another contribution.
Because I think, you could have a PhD on designing a fit for purpose traceability system for grains. But just don't underestimate the work that will potentially go into that.
Yeah, I'm positive that it will work. Otherwise, I couldn't even meet with them. But yeah, there's a big risk.
I think CBH had a farm quality assurance scheme called Better Farm IQ. It might be interesting looking into why that was created and then why it was basically discontinued. They offered farmers a price premium for membership of that scheme. Yes, that's perhaps a comment. Right?
No, that's a very valuable contribution. I met with them. The people are no longer working for CBH, but they have offered a lot of valuable information because I wanted to understand why it didn't work. And it seems that it was working, but it was discontinued internally. It wasn't because it didn't have value, but I'm keen to explore more with them because they were really working in workshops. They have a level of engagement was of 2,000 farmers.
I think it was might have been the farmers who wanted it discontinued.
Yes.
Because some farmers did not want to have the bother of joining it, and so they said it's unfair that other farmers are getting a price premium. I think Ross like this. So.
Yeah, I think what also happened is that there were some farmers that joined the scheme that got a lot of benefit from it because the record keeping and chemical control delivered business benefits to some businesses, but then there was no, in the end, price premium, no sustained price premium for grain that was produced by that system. And so farmers then were saying, well, why invest in something for which there's no market premium?
Just back to that, when they introduced the ISCC, the cannot go into the EU, all of those systems, reporting frameworks they set up for the better farm queuing value, and then they went into that system.
So it's not used a trial system.
Yeah, and so there was some benefit coming out, but not necessarily through the farming system.
Who's the decision maker that you're trying to inform here? Is it just CBH? Or is it the grains industry? Is it individual farmers?
So it's the whole grain industry, because I see that what CBH decides will leverage the opportunities of farmers in the international market. So if CBH doesn't have this system, farmers will have to opt by passing them in order to get those premiums. So in a way, it would be an investment decision that probably CBH could be able to benefit and keep that benefit, not sharing that by being premiums. But in the end, CBH is represented by growers' interest. So I see that there will be some subsidy.
The benefits are industry-wide, but the actual decision maker would be CBH.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to be clear about.
Yeah, it's CBH.
Yeah.
Steve?
If you're interested in looking in, having a better idea of how the certification, just to be credible, produces a value, there's been quite a lot of work internationally on firms being ISO 9000 and or ISO 14000 certified and quantifying depending on the circumstances, what product, what country, and so on, how much value this was actually. So we're talking market value was being given to firms, and that how they do that might be of interest to you.
Yeah.
If that's part of your study as well, which it seems it will be, if you want to measure how much value being able to, having a traceability, which is information that is needed for certification, how much value that's actually generated, and what are the factors that contribute to this value, or prevent the value from happening or enhance it. There's quite a bit of work there, not necessarily on wheat. It's more general all industries, but it could be of interest. The other thing is, it seems to me from, if I understood you right, it's actually a mix of ISO 9000 and ISO 14000 characteristics. That's in terms of the wheat, right? It could be 9000 is basically linked to experience attributes, and 14000 to credits attributes. But
It's only 2000 as well.
Yeah, it seems to be a mix. So that relates to what you do.
Well, that'll be interesting. Right? The ISCC is probably one of the things that could benefit from this kind of system, because initially we don't assume that this will be applied to all grain volume, but probably for specific commodities, or not that commodity as the canola with the ISCC certification. If you have to segregate from grain that is not certified, that's where the system of these characteristics, especially if it goes under segregation, where you need to have separate flows.
Michael and then Mark.
Michael?
I wanted to reflect on Dave's question about who the decision maker is. I think it's more than CBH, because they can't force that down onto the farmers. They have other paths to trade out. So though that case study is going to be particularly focused and getting information from CBH in order to actually do that, it's going to have to actually have some understanding about whether or not the farmers will actually sign up to provide the information in.
Which is the fourth part of the project.
Which is the fourth part of the project, yeah. So I think there's a bit about the adoption at the lower, the student at the lower, the farmer level, as well as at CBH level. I think so. And though if it failed at either place, I think the farmers may want to have it, and CBH may say no, or if it failed the other way, the farmers just say, nah, just don't want to have this, and then they can't offer the incentives. They won't. I think it's both. Actually, is going to have to be looked at and understood, and that's why the part 4 is about. It's about will the farmers actually take that.
I'm not sure there is one decision maker actually. I was thinking there are farmers involved still, and the consumers with consumer preferences. We've got government and the regulations, and they will make decisions regarding this thing. And we've got also the market itself with market competition and competitive advantage.
But I guess, but still, that's all true. But specifically for the benefit cost analysis, you're actually analysing a particular decision option there.
Investment.
And whose decision option is that? I suspect it's CBH's.
Yeah.
But it has to account for all these other decision makers in their behaviour in answering that.
And that's where I really have a shared interest. But
yeah, that's true. In fact, you're looking at the second one, your second your abstract is CBH focused, so that's part of the industry. And then the third one is also the supply from the farmer side. You could have chosen others, right? Goes to the government regulator side, from the consumer side, and so on. But I think it's clear enough what you're focusing on those, the second and third.
Marit and then Chris.
Yeah, really interested in this topic. Thank you for that presentation. A suggestion could be to focus on specific aspects of the product, because the traceability could be about, labor, environmental impacts, greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, lots of different things. So if it proves challenging, you could potentially focus on one of those, because one of the major challenges that industry partners that I work with are concerned with is the data exchange, just even the technology of how to exchange the data. It's a massive barrier in generating that nice supply chain that you had on your screen, but also farmers' willingness to share that data and the safety of their data. So there is a trial in WA, I think it's called Xstrata, that provides a safe platform for data sharing, and you can just talk to Tom Barlow, Heaven Barlow, what's his name? Just for the experience when you get to that, how willing are farmers to adopt, for the experience of, just from the context of, are they willing to share their data? And they will have some valuable insights from that project, which is ongoing. You can find that. There's also a company here in Perth called Source Certain, that I've only recently come across, but they have this novel technology to trace products in international supply chains, specifically livestock products. So you might be interested.
I didn't mention that, but there is much more progress in the meat industry regarding traceability, because it's easier to trace.
Yeah, they literally just look at the DNA of the meat, right? They just take
Which is very expensive at this moment, but compared to that,
and so actually one more is the bins that CDH has. There's multiple farmers supplied to one bin, so that it all gets aggregated. If you are one farmer adopting certain preferable practices, they get lost when you like the bin.
Yeah, and it will be the metric that we need to see how costly it is to have that segregation in terms of a regional level, where you can probably.
Well, clearly too costly, otherwise it would already exist.
Sorry, say it again.
But clearly that is too costly.
Yeah,
otherwise it would
of
already
course.
exist. At the moment, you have wide open eggs supplying, the bands driving directly to the consumers, because it's that's clearly more costly.
Brings is a big challenge.
It's my question. Is one farmer's decision to adopt dependent on the other farmer's decision as a group? So do you need that critical mass to generate value from this system?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see if they follow the example of their neighbors, what they're doing, or it's something that they just are profit driven and they just don't share that information. So
Probably going to be
farmers
driven. If they provide a bin, then maybe the farmers will follow.
Yeah.
But they're not gonna adopt together in the hope that that CDH will.
Because in a way this could become an industry good, and you have this free riding that no one is engaged. It could be
More of a prisoner's dilemma.
I think of a segregation. If it's going to work, there'd have to be a segregation within the logistics system.
Yeah.
And that's quite a big thing to do. Add another segregation is not trivial.
no.
So the CBH would have to be really convinced.
Yeah. And that's why probably this could prove profitable at a smaller level for a specific market, containerized exports, like meeting very specific market. So this will be part probably of the conclusions.
Did you want
Yeah,
to?
something Mary said, maybe doing something, she's talking about a specific characteristic for traceability. In fact, that makes me think that depending on characteristics of the product, and many characteristics, the ease of traceability could vary a lot. And that would be probably an interesting thing to clarify. For example, for all the way from the supply of the information to the transmission information to then the demand of information, actually. And so some type of information, some type of characteristics, farmers would, yeah, fine, I can, others would, I don't really want to do. It could be difficult to produce, it's difficult or expensive to create that information, or not expensive. So we have a number of parameters that will
difficult to express.
also, yeah, there could be a metric, easy metric for it, or it could not be. There's a whole bunch of parameters there, and I think that's really important to have a clear picture on a particular product. And of course, depending on who's asking for that information. So, for example, it could be a certain demand that you would want a rather difficult, expensive, and so on type of traceability. Another one less so. At first, I was thinking the driving factor is going to be whoever wants to force a certification. So the certification, if that's the product that will deliver value, that's what you have to take as a package, as a bundle. You can't, because otherwise you don't get certified. But that made me think that could be the ultimate thing that you want to do, but you have to split it up anyway. I don't know if there are different suppliers of certification. If there were, I'm not sure. Probably a very few.
With the ISCC alternatives, there are others.
Yeah, there are others.
Yeah.
So depending on what they need in order to certify, depending on, let's say, the cost of the scope certification, there could be, a choice of these suppliers of information, or whoever wants to be certified between these.
So currently it works with audits. It's not that all the farms.
Yeah, no, I know.
They have tips.
Yeah, but still, the audit, it's an agreement
Yeah.
between the auditor and the auditor, right?
It's random. Could be anything.
Just to follow on from what really David was saying, I think an interesting question for CBH is, will its commitment to traceability be an offensive or defensive investment? Because one of the things about Australia, unlike its competitors, in Western Australia, the cost of storing grain is very low cost. As you know, in Argentina, the bulkhead storage system is known as kangaroo storage, and we don't need to have grain dryers because we harvest into a more dry environment. So we can actually segregate grain very cheaply, and then what flows from that is Australia strategically advantaged in the traceability system because it can gain leverage from the relative inexpensive storing grain.
Adding to that, also, we have better insight. The structure of Western Australia exponential, which is pretty straightforward.
Yes.
It's different what I see in Argentina, what you see in Brazil, but you have many players in between. Where it's much more complex to integrate a system to manage all the segregation logistics involved. So I see there is a competitive advantage.
Yeah, and on our doorstep are growing sizes of population, increasingly wealthy populations that are probably strategically in a position where traceability will increasingly matter.
The example with the mountain barley going to South America, you need to go really long distances if you're not competitive in value by having probably this kind of differentiation. Otherwise, you won't be competitive against other options.
More questions? Looks like this is a very interesting,
Okay, thank you.
complex topic, and that's good. So you are setting for 3 PhDs in the. Yeah. Work hard. Yeah. So. Huh?
Yeah, right. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Very
That's
timely project.
interesting, fresh topic. So thank you all for all the comments, feedback, and thank you, Emanuel.
Sorry for the late call.
See you.